welcome to the Rotary Club of London meeting of Monday, January the 9th. January is Vocational Service Month. This is an opportunity to think about how our club engages fellow Rotary members through our professional skills or vocations, and how we bring Rotary's ideals into the workplace and community. In bringing together people from diverse professions and backgrounds, Rotary recognizes the importance of all skills and occupations. So, celebrate your vocation this month. I'd now like to, I'll introduce the visiting Rotarians and guests. Visiting Rotarians, we have Lynn Coates, my boss, from the District 6330 Passport Club. We have Lorna Gunning Francisco. I don't know if I think I'm the Rotary Club of London, Hyde Park. And our guest speaker is also a Rotarian, and she will be introduced with greater detail in a few minutes, in a moment. And we have Karen Knox, guest of Stephen Knox. I'd now like to invite Malcolm Cox to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, President Rick. Our speaker today is Cindy Benning. Cindy's a Rotarian with the St. Thomas Club, but I first met her when she was a member of the Hyde Park Club. Then she moved to St. Thomas, so we lost her and her talent and skills in helping the club. She's a certified executive coach with a bachelor's degree in science and a master's degree in business. She was part of the executive committee of 2 different pharmaceutical companies, then resigning early in 2021 when she decided it was time to tell her story in her book, Being Brave. Then she developed a leadership model, which she now wants to share with the members of this club and leaders of organizations. And Cindy's real passion is to develop brave leaders for a better world. Cindy Benning.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you guys for, thank you everyone for inviting me to be here today and to tell my story a little bit and to talk about brave leadership, which I think is a very important topic for not just Rotarians, but for everybody. So before I get started to talk about being brave, I'm going to do a little fun self-discovery for you by asking you a few questions, okay? So the first question is, what's your favorite color? And it's not just as simple as what's your favorite color, it's what's your favorite color and why? Why is it your favorite color? What are some of the emotions that are evoked when you think of that color? So if you visualize in your mind this color, what do you feel? What are the emotions that are evoked? Everybody got something in their head? The next one is, what's your favorite animal? And when you think about your favorite animal, this time think about what are the characteristics that that animal has that you like. So the animal that's your favorite must have some specific characteristics that are the reason why you choose it. And the last question is, what is your favorite body of water or type of water? So like a stream or a lake or a swimming pool or a hot shower, that type of thing. So when you think about water, think about the feelings that you get related to that body of water or that type of water. Okay, everybody got 3 answers? Okay, so the first question, your favorite color and those feelings are related to how you see yourself. So imagine those feelings that you get, those are the feelings that you feel about yourself. And the second one, favorite animal, those are the characteristics that you seek out in a partner or in friendships. So if you think about your partner, do they have those characteristics that you thought about in your favorite animal? And the body of water and those feelings you have around that body of water, those are related to your love life. Sorry for the people who like cold showers. So I don't know how true these things are, but it's just kind of a fun way to talk about self-discovery. And you got to believe that somehow these things are linked, like your preferences are linked somehow to the way you live your life. I'm going to start by giving you a little background about me. First of all, I was never a writer. I didn't have a creative bone in my body. I didn't think philosophically at all when I was younger. I was a science nerd. I liked everything to be black and white, right or wrong. I didn't like ambiguity. Just give me clear things. So you can imagine my favorite animals back then would be penguins and zebras and killer whales because they're all black and white. So I started my post-secondary education in biological sciences, hoping that it would suit this obsession I had with black and white. And after college, I got a job working in a lab doing basic chemistry. So it doesn't get any more clear than that, black and white. But that lasted maybe 2 years, and they offered me a position as lab manager. And I suspect there were some specific reasons for that. Why I was promoted so soon, but you'll have to read my book if you want to know, my thoughts behind that. But as it turned out, I guess I was pretty good at it. I ended up being in leadership positions the rest of my career, essentially. Over the years, I did pretty good. If I listened to the people that were on my teams, they spoke highly of me. I was promoted often, and by the end of my 30-plus year career in pharmaceuticals, mainly in animal health, I was the group director, which is the North American, European equivalent to VP of manufacturing and quality for a global animal health company that was based in France. So there I was, sitting on the executive committee of a male-dominated French company, being a science nerd. But, there's always a but, in parallel with my successful career, what I would say was successful, I lived a tumultuous personal life. Mainly due to choices that I made with relationships with men. So I'm going to get into that a little bit later. I spent years doing self-discovery work to learn more about myself and why these divergent lives existed. Why was I so successful professionally, but not personally? And so in 2021, when I retired from my career job, I knew it was time to tell my story. The story of this self-discovery journey that I was on, as well as what I learned about leadership and what virtues I believe are important for the leaders of today and tomorrow. And that's where brave comes in. Brave in this context has two meanings. The obvious one, brave, which is the absence of fear. And many people equate courage and bravery, but they're not the same. Courage is doing something even though you're afraid. You go ahead and do it anyways. Bravery is complete absence of fear. So for me, being courageous is a choice, but being brave is just a way of being. So I played on the word brave to come up with 5 virtues that I believe are important and critical in today's leaders. Well, in anyone really. And those are benevolence, respect, authenticity, vulnerability, and emotional consciousness. So before I get into what each of those mean, I promised I'd tell you a little more about my story. From very early on in my life, somehow the message that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy, got entrenched in my brain. From experiences, big or small, these beliefs that I had about myself became part of who I was. And I spent a lifetime living what I refer to as the 4 Ps. Please, perfect, perform, prove. I married an abusive alcoholic when I was 20, and I stayed with him for 6 years. I had my first daughter with him. I married another alcoholic when I was 33, and I stayed with him for 10 years. And I had my second daughter with him. I started living with another man when I was 44. I stayed with him for 15 years. And during those 15 years, he developed similar substance abuse issues. And he had an affair. And by the time I left him, I was pushing 60. And I was wondering, what the hell is going on in my brain that's leading me to make these bad decisions over and over again? I had started to uncover some patterns when I was doing some leadership training during my career. And I learned about how successful leaders interact with others. And it's part of why I did well in my career. And I learned about being kind and respectful with your teams and how that leads to overall well-being in organizations. But it didn't change how I felt about myself. Even though on the outside I appeared to be strong and caring, on the inside I was still questioning my abilities and my worthiness. And then in early 2021, I had an experience that was a huge turning point for me. I was doing some online dating. Yes, I know it's crazy. And I had been dating a man, 3 dates we had, 3 dates. And he rejected me. And I spiraled. Every negative thought that I ever had about myself was amplified. I was in so much emotional pain that I actually wanted to take my own life. I was having discussions with my children about where my insurance papers are and how they were going to survive when I was gone. And you can imagine that didn't go well with them. And slowly the emotions started to dissipate. Logic started to take over. And I swore at that moment that I would never be in that much emotional pain again. And so I hired a coach. I saw a therapist. And I started reading and listening to anything I could get my hands on that would help me understand what was going on that was leading me to believe that I was so unworthy, I didn't deserve to live. And what I discovered was that all those thoughts that I had about my own unworthiness needed to be unprogrammed, if you will. I needed to understand that I developed those ideas as a way of protecting myself from being hurt when I was younger. And those thoughts aren't valid anymore. They're not true. There's no prerequisite to worthiness. We are all born with the right to love and to be loved. And so now, each time I feel that all too familiar pang of pain, I try to recognize it right away and link it to a thought and identify, is that thought true? Is that valid? So I'm still a work in progress for these beliefs and behaviors, but at least I'm more aware. And now my favorite representation of myself is the dragonfly. And you'll see that on the cover of my book. You'll see it on most things that I wear. Because the dragonfly demonstrates transformation as its superpower. It transforms itself actually 6 times through its life. And it's also pictured very often over water, reflecting beautiful colors. So I've come a long way from that black and white. Everything's right or wrong. So let's talk about the 5 brave virtues now. And when I think about leaders and these virtues, I know with all my heart that they cannot truly live these virtues if they haven't done the core work on self-discovery, of knowing who they are and the essence of their being, of knowing what their values are. In any leadership journey, this is the first step. And that's what my company does in our work with leaders. We teach them to ask themselves questions that provoke emotional responses, almost like I did with you today. It's not just what's your favorite color, it's how do you feel about that color? Then you link those emotions to thought patterns. Remove layers of the ego that have developed in your lifetime. And then we talk about how to bring those values and live those 5 brave virtues. And when those 5 brave virtues are lived every day in organizations, they evoke trust and a sense of belonging in those organizations. And we have a lot of data that shows that to be the case. So I'd like to share with you the deeper meaning of each of these virtues. We know they have a positive impact on organizations' efficiency and creativity and culture. And in my book, I give references that support that. So benevolence, for most people, benevolence is just being kind. But in organizational leadership, benevolence is a bit more than that. It means acting in the best interests of the other and of the organization. So it's critical when you're communicating and giving feedback, for example, if your feedback might seem negative, that it actually is seen to be in the person's best interest. So it's not just being a nice guy and doing everything the other guy says to do or the other guy needs or asks for. It's about acting in the best interests of the other person and of the organization. And respect is a word that seems simple too, but it covers so much. In simple terms, it means I respect you even though we're different. It means that I value that you have fears. I value that you have different opinions. I value that you have a different heritage than I do. I value you have your own path and your own story. And I need to take all of these things into consideration when I interact with you. And when I do this, it brings value not only to me, but to you and to the organization. And authenticity. It's an attribute that requires courage because it means you're living in alignment with your values. It's knowing what's important to you and not contradicting those values in your words and actions, even if it results in conflict with another person. It's communicating clearly when you're asked to compromise. For your boss, maybe you have to compromise a value. That's okay, as long as you communicate. That's not aligned with my values. I understand why you're asking me to do it. It's not aligned with my values. Standing in your own truth. Vulnerability is probably the most difficult virtue to live, but I like it because it demonstrates trust and it evokes trust. Being vulnerable means that you trust another person with your light and your dark, and showing and sharing both parts. But before you can be vulnerable, you need some degree of trust. So there's a time for vulnerability and a time when it's not appropriate. For example, I wouldn't stand in front of a group of people that I don't know and tell them all my darkest stories just for the sake of being vulnerable. But if I share my story because I want to evoke a response or a thought that will be beneficial to others, and there's no risk to my personal well-being, then it's being appropriately vulnerable. A lot of people are afraid to be vulnerable because they don't want to give too much away. But it's important to remember that if you have that trust and there's no risk to you, it's okay. And the last of the 5 great virtues, emotional consciousness, is similar to concepts you might have heard, like emotional intelligence, developed by Dan Goleman, or emotional agility by Susan David. But I didn't want to repeat those concepts, so I chose the term emotional consciousness to demonstrate maybe a deeper state of awareness. And it's the idea is that when you feel an emotion, you recognize it and you recognize the thought that's evoking the emotion. And then you look at that thought, figure out where it's coming from. Is it coming from an old program belief that's not valid? Is it a logical thought that is valid? And then once you've done this enough times, you've been able to let go of those old program beliefs. So you have this emotional response. You go, what is the thought behind this? No, that's not valid. Then you know more, you don't have that response anymore after a while. And it takes practice. And sooner or later you don't get triggered. So now imagine you can live these 5 virtues without even thinking about them, without fearing someone will judge you, knowing you're being true to yourself and you're acting in the best interest of yourself and others. It is then that you will become truly brave. Thank you.
Okay. I can assure you, Cindy, that one of the talents that a Rotary president needs is vulnerability.
Yeah.
Anybody that's done that or stepped up to take on that leadership role has exposed themselves, recognizing that they're going to be vulnerable because they're going to be adjudicated by a group of their peers who they respect. There's another thing, and I ran across this in the corporate world, a term that I use, and I describe them as leaders that are benevolent dictators. And you come across many of them. The benevolence is the positive side, the dictatorial is the dark side.
Anyway, my goal is to bring this into as many leaders as I can. I'm talking to somebody from a Human Resources Association today. And you know anybody in organizations that would benefit from this type of training? Give them my name. Thank you.
In recognition of your presentation to us today, we made a contribution to the Polio Plus campaign of the Rotary Foundation to immunize 50 infants against polio. Because of you, Rotary is one step closer to polio.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our announcements now. I'm going to call up John Stewart and Keith Morrow.
Thank you, President Rick. Fellow Rotarians and guests, get your calendars out. March the 24th, Friday, 6 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock. It's the biggest fundraiser this club's had this year. Rock around the clock. Tickets are on sale now. And if you, in order to get your tickets, go to the Rotary Club of London website. Go down at the bottom, you'll see this article right here. And down about here is the site to go in to get your tickets. We're looking for a sellout crowd. We need all the cash we can get for the money because we didn't have a golf tournament last year. So we're hoping to make up on this time. So have a look at it and get your tickets and ask your friends and your neighbors. I'll be back at you again so you won't be forgetting about it. Thank you.
The website is rotaryparty.ca.
So as it relates to this event, I am the club's collector of auction items. So if you have an auction item for the event, contact me and I'll work out the logistics of gathering it up, getting a description, and getting it on the website.
Thank you, Keith. I might add a bit of a comment to that. When you go on the Rotary Party, www.rotaryparty.ca, it takes you to this Trellis website, which is the software we use to run our online auction. But once you're in there and you go up to the right, up to the top corner in your own account, you'll see silent auction. You click on that, and that's when the old website comes forward. We had a bingo on Monday, January the 2nd. Keith Morrow was there, Don Bork was there, Randy Harden was there, and I was there. And I'm delighted to say we've had probably the best bingo we've had in several years because we generated $7,840 for the bingo. Well, we do have bingos coming up in February. I'll make the February, March, none in April, one in May, and none in June. So we have 3 more in this Rotary year, which means we're on target to generate the greatest amount of funds from bingo that we have ever generated as a club. Diane Twinstra, unfortunately, isn't able to be here, but she wanted me to pass on the comment that she has now made arrangements with the London Food Bank for our club to have a set night to do volunteer service at the London Food Bank. We will have the 3rd Monday evening of every month. We're not going to start that new schedule until Monday, March the 20th, but you can now mark it down and put it down as a volunteer evening for the club. We typically need between 10 and 12 volunteers to help at the food bank. So our next one will be Monday, March the 20th.
One last bit of announcement came in this morning from the UWO Rotary Club. They are still looking for volunteer drivers for the Day of Giving. The Day of Giving will be at the end of this month on the 28th, which is a Saturday. For those of you that have not taken part in the Day of Giving, it's not a particularly hard working day. Our role at Rotarians is to drive and deliver students to do work and help with household tasks for the people that need assistance. If you are interested in helping out with really looking for people still, the sign-up link is in and They are trying to filter out the hoarders this year. We already had a conversation. So hopefully there will be no hoarders this year.
How many have already signed up?
Currently, 4 Rotarians signed.
Okay, well, you got 3 of them here. Steve and Bruce and myself. It's a wonderful experience, and it gives us interaction with our Rotary Club at Western, and the people that we serve really bring a smile to your face because they appreciate the service that Rotary and the Rotary Club provides. As I close this meeting, I want you to imagine what the Rotary Club of London can do in these first 6 months of 2023. This meeting is now adjourned.